guys, we're back with Cooking with Mr. Rauch. Last time, the speed method of macaroni and cheese did not work very well. So this time, I'm following the directions. This is the classic prep. I got my water boiling already, as you can see, nice and hot, bubbling all good. Now, first it says to boil water. So I got out my pan, I added my water, put it on the stove, it's boiling. Next it says stir in macaroni. So I'm going to have to put my macaroni in. Done. And let me grab a spoon here to stir it. And it says to stir in the macaroni, boil 7 to 8 minutes or until macaroni is tender, stirring occasionally. So I'm just going to leave that sit there for a while. Now I realized after doing last time that you got to do things in the right order. Alright? And you also have to take your time to make sure it's done right. Because if you don't take your time, you're going to end up making a lot of mistakes and some really horrible macaroni and cheese, as you remember from last time. So this time I'm planning on slowing down and doing it right. I'm going to turn down the heat just a little bit so we don't have any boilovers as I'm talking here. And one thing that this reminded me of, this macaroni and cheese episode, is PEMDAS, Order of Operations. Now, we're just getting into this, so let's go over what PEMDAS is. PEMDAS, first we start with the P. The P stands for parentheses. Okay? The parentheses is what comes first. It's like boiling the water for macaroni and cheese. It's what we have to do first, and if we don't do that first, we're going to be left with really bad macaroni and cheese. Okay? The E. The E is exponents. We do this little symbol to remind us that exponents are up high. They're the little numbers above the number to tell how many times we multiply that number. That number is called the base. The exponent is above it. We multiply the base times itself, however many times the exponents. The macaroni is kind of like the exponents. Because after you get the water boiling, you put the macaroni in there. That's the second step. Exponents is the second step. So far we had to boil water, which is like parentheses. Then we had to do our exponents, which was like adding the macaroni. Okay? So we got those two steps taken care of. After that step, we have multiplication. Now, multiplication and division come next. Okay? We're going to have to cut this part.
It's alright.
I didn't think what I wanted to say. Okay? Now, multiplication and division come next. If we were to start doing multiplication and division before doing parentheses and exponents, it'd be like mixing the cheese and the butter and the milk together without the noodles or without the water boiling. Or putting it all in a blender, which we saw what happens last time. And we put it all in there together instead of letting the water boil, doing our steps in the correct steps, we would have really bad macaroni. So that's the same thing. We have to make sure we multiply and divide after parentheses, after the exponents. Okay? And the same goes for adding and subtracting, which is our fifth and our sixth last step. Adding and subtracting have to be last. They are after the parentheses, the exponents, the multiplying and dividing, and then the adding and subtracting. We're going to take a short break here, and we're going to come back once our noodles are nice and tender. Alright, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Noodles are just about tender. Let's taste one. Be careful doing this because you can easily burn your mouth, but I'm a seasoned pro now. Those are perfect, perfect. Okay? Now remember, boiling water was like parentheses. We had to do that first. If we didn't boil the water, our noodles wouldn't be soft. And we'd have a horrible, horrible problem trying to eat them. Okay? And they taste terrible, as we found out last time. Now, shut off our stove. Make sure we're very careful here. Okay? This water and these noodles are hot. So I'm going to drain them. Now, after we boiled the water, we put the macaroni in. That was like our exponents. Okay? Our macaroni is like our exponents. That was our second step. We had to get that done. We had to soften the macaroni before we're ready to add the other stuff. Now, the next ingredients include milk, butter, here, and the cheese that makes the magic happen. Okay? Now this stuff right here, these three ingredients, actually 4 including my tuna, because I know you guys might not like tuna, but tuna and macaroni and cheese is delicious. And that's the way my wife likes it. So we're going to eat this together. These 4 ingredients are kind of like the multiplication and division, because it doesn't matter what order they go in. Okay? So we're going to put the butter in, and then we're going to put the cheese in. Now it doesn't matter. I could have put the cheese in first, and then put the butter in. Or I could have put the milk in first, and then the butter, and then the cheese. Or I could have put the tuna in first. It doesn't matter. Multiplication, we do whichever one is first in the problem. We do whichever one's first in the problem. That means we go from left to right. So if you come across a division problem first, when all the parentheses and exponents are gone, we're going to do that one first. If you come across a multiplication problem first, we're going to do multiplication first. I always like to tell people that the division and the multiplication, they're like boyfriend and girlfriend. Whichever one comes to the door first, that's the one that goes in. Okay? Or if it's a nice gentleman, he'll hold the door for the girl. But it really doesn't matter what order they go in. Okay? Now, we're going to mix all this stuff together. That was our multiplication, our dividing. Very important that we do whichever one comes first, because if we don't do whichever one comes first, our rules will not work. Alright? Oh, this is going to be delicious. Alright? Now, I'm going to go right over here and we're going to let that soak up a little bit. Our last step is some good old salt and pepper. Now, this is, again, we're not going to add the salt and pepper until we got the tuna and the butter and the milk and the cheese all mixed up, because the salt and pepper are going to be like our adding and our subtracting. Our adding and subtracting, just like the multiplication and division, we do whichever one comes first. So right here, left to right, pepper would go first. Okay? We can change it. Salt would go first. It doesn't matter. It matters which one comes first in the problem. We can do pepper first or salt first, depending on which one comes first in the problem. So let's add a little pepper here to make it taste delicious. Don't want to add too much. My wife doesn't like anything spicy, but you got to add a little bit of salt here. Okay, not too much again. Salt and pepper. It doesn't matter which order I put them in, as long as I do whichever one comes first in the problem. And there we go. Now we got our mac and cheese. Now we got to try it. I'm really hoping that this time it turns out a lot better than the last time with the blender. The blender just didn't work. All right, let's try this out. Wow. Way better. Way better than last time with the blender. I'm going to enjoy this meal, and it's all because I did things in order. I did my boiling water first, which is like my parentheses. And then I added my noodles and let them soak up the water. Okay? Let them get soft. That was like my exponents. Gotta do parentheses and exponents first. Then I added those 4 ingredients: the milk, the tuna, the cheese, and the butter. Whichever one comes first in the problem. That's like my multiplication division. And lastly, I added my salt and pepper. And that one, once again, it comes whichever one comes first. Turned out to be a perfect meal. And so you guys can solve order of operation problems the same way if you do things in the right order. And if you take your time and you don't make mistakes like I did last time. So here's Mr. Rauch signing off. Maybe I can do slow and simple cooking a lot better than fast and speedy cooking. Have a good one.